I picked 3 nettles this morning with the 3 nettle challenge in mine. Now these came from my favourite patch last year. Big question is, are they as good this year? Could it still be a little bit early? Let's split them and find out. I've stamped on this batch on my kitchen floor when I got back in, and they're peeling up very nicely so far. Well, the bast strips have come away from the pith beautifully. They're really quite wet at the moment, so I think I'm going to enjoy this cup of tea while I think about how best to scrape them today. I think it might be a flint blade sort of day. We're going to go for a very light scraping, just using a flint. So I've got them on the surface, on a bit of leather. Usually I've got a hand supporting, and then just very lightly. It's about the same pressure of butter bread with. It doesn't need to be too heavy. I'm not trying to remove all the green, just some of it. I'll do that on both sides. Because it's so early in the season still, I'm scraping just till these white fibres start showing through the green. I'm not going to go any further than that at the moment. Once I've got everything lightly scraped, and it really is lightly scraped, I'm not going any further than that, I'm going to split them into ribbons and let them dry completely. Once it's pretty much dry, I've just folded it in on itself, and I'm just going to roll it between my hands. Not too hard. Early season yet. I think they're going to still be fairly fragile, the fibres. You can probably see the dust flying off, and that's all the little bits of bark flaking away from the fibres. I'm just going to do this for quite some time. This isn't all the dust, but you can see how much green material flakes away when you start rolling it. And, excuse my hands, can you see how the fibres are starting to show through quite nicely? Now I'm not going to over roll this because it's still really early season stuff, and I think the fibres may still be a little bit fragile. So just a tiny bit more rolling. Oh, there's some nice stuff coming through there. Look at those. Tiny bit more rolling, and I'm going to try splicing it and plying it, and we'll see what it's like for strength. So I'm splicing these. I left them pretty much in the natural ribbons, so even though they've been rubbed and the fibres are showing through, they're still in quite distinct strips. So what I'm doing is I'm having a quick lick of each end of the bits I'm splicing, and the enzymes in your saliva also do help activate the natural pectins in the bark so that they stick really nicely together. Put the top bit together, give it a twist, fold it back on itself, and that's strong enough. It will come apart, but the idea is that it only has to stand up to that light tension while I ply it together in a little bit, and making sure that that twist is firm really helps. If it snaps off, that bit did, don't worry about it. And you can see there is some real strength in there. Just redo it. Far better to find the weak spots now than halfway through putting the cord together. That's better. And I'm just winding this around my fingers. This is a bit of an experiment. I'm going to try plying from the loose end and the live end when I finish. So I'm just going to wind it up, sort out another strand, keep splicing away. There's a lot more about this on my video on prehistoric splicing if you want a more step-by-step. Here's both ends of those spliced strands running together, and the plan is just to match them up, but where I've got bits like this where there's lots of sticky out bits, I'm just going to pass it through my mouth very, very lightly, and just smooth it up. I'm not even really going to twist it. I'm just going to get everything lined up nicely, and then I'll wind those 2 strands together into a new ball, And that is what I'll put the twist into in a little bit. I think that makes sense. We'll try it and see. There's one of those splices sticking out at the side, so I just need to make sure that that really is matched up nice and smoothly. Nearly at the end of this bit now, and this seems to be working quite well. All I've done is occasionally run it through my mouth just to barely moisten any sticky out bits. We're on quite a fat bit there, so it's quite easy to see. I'm putting a bit of a mini twist on, just enough to bind it together. This isn't really the plying stage. This is just making sure everything's lying together. And I had very few tangles and no breakages, which is amazing, really. I was expecting to have to patch in a few bits. So I think that's now ready for plying properly. There's hardly any moisture in there, but the bits that I licked briefly should have put just enough moisture in to let me spin this. I think I'm going to try spindle. I'm going to pop it onto a drop spindle and we'll give it a good hard twist, and then we'll let it dry and we'll see what we've ended up with. I couldn't find my usual spindle, so I've set up a little clay whirl on a stick, and you can see this is still quite hairy the way it's coming out, but that's all right, I don't mind. So all I'm doing is just really, with a bit more damp where it needs it, making sure that twist gets right into it. There's no real skill or technique here, it's just putting some twist in. Fire rolling would have worked just as well. And yeah, there are some really good lumpy bumpy bits in this, but overall it's a lot more consistent than I thought it might be, given that I haven't really put a huge amount of effort into this. So yeah, lots of hairy bits, not worried about those at all, but generally a reasonably consistent result. We'll finish putting that together and then we'll measure it. And here's the result. Not quite 7.5 metres of, yes, quite hairy, but 2-ply spliced string. I think if I put even the tiniest bit more effort into preparing these, I'd have got a really nice smooth result without all the sticky out bits. Now the question is, how strong is it and will it stand up to being used in a little project? One of the things I've wanted to try with Nettle, and I haven't yet, is Sprang. That's going to be a teeny tiny project, but I might set up the smallest little Sprang bag and we'll see what happens. You know that feeling where you set up a project and you think, this might be a really stupid idea. Might be one of those. This may just be way too wibbly wobbly. I'm going to try it anyway. Right. Not proud of this bit. Those of you that do Sprang will immediately see how very, very ropey this is. The last time I did Sprang with Nettle, it was a fine, smooth cord, which worked perfectly well. This really, really hairy, roughly spliced stuff is, well, it's working, I suppose. And nothing snapped, so again, proof of concept. We'll consider it artistic and we'll see what it looks like in a minute. Don't hold your breath. Well, as expected, off the loom and sewn up, and I was really running short of yarn, so it could have done with a bigger drawstring. This is not a good bit of Sprang. However, it did work. I'm going to give it a wash, which always helps. I think if we treat that as a proof of concept, if I do exactly the same thing again, but take just that little bit of extra time over the scraping and the rubbing and the splicing to get something really smooth, well, I think the next one will work fine. Well, a wash always helps. This is definitely the scruffiest bit of Sprang I have ever done, but it served its purpose. I've learned a lot. I know how far I can expect 3 nettles to go. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it better. A few days later, this is the second batch. I've done pretty much exactly the same thing to it. Very, very lightly scraped, dried and rubbed. The only thing I've done differently this time is I've rubbed it just a bit more, and you can see those fibres all coming out quite nicely at the ends. And I'm hopeful that I've rubbed away some of the really lumpy bits of bark that stopped it splicing nicely last time. Plus, I'm going to take a bit more care and attention this time. Well, that's already looking better, isn't it? So this has been exactly as the last one, spliced, brought together, making sure the ends are smoothed in, and then twisted on the spindle. Those thigh spinning works just as well. And I've tried to go for quite a tight spin on this, because I did observe in the last one that after it had been washed, everything opened out very slightly. So a few sticky out bits, absolutely fine. Those will wear away in progress, but hopefully none of the big lumps and knots. So next thing to do, find out how much we've got, how it compares to the last batch, and try out a little Sprang. All spliced and plied. There's little balls, probably only an inch across, and there's very, very nearly 8 metres of thread in there. I think I measured it in at 790 something or other. Now, we've all seen those amazing carbonised balls of thread from prehistoric sites, places like Must Farm and the Swiss lake villages. They're about the same size. They are so much finer than mine. It really does give you an insight into just how skilled the individuals were. I mean, in my case, that's only 3 nettles. If I'd worked it even finer, the yardage probably would have been even longer. Let's see how it sprangs up. Well, on the Sprang frame there, and hopefully you can see that that's definitely working up tighter, and whilst there's still plenty of imperfections in this, which I really don't mind, there's far less lumps and bumps and sticky out bits to this. So I shall keep going. It's going to be a tiny little piece again. We'll see what the end result is, and we'll compare it to the first version. And the moment of truth, I just had enough to finish this, including the cordage, although I did have to chase around on the floor for a few little scraps to finish the cord. It's just a possibility that maybe an inch of that didn't come from my 3 nettles, so yes, anyway. I'll give this a wash. You can see how much is coming off this. The thing with a very lightly processed nettle is it's going to keep shedding bark and softening up for some time. So, scrumply little thing, let's give it a wash and we'll see what the finished result is. Washing always makes the most amazing difference, and I'm feeling vindicated about that couple of bits I had to raid from elsewhere, because that bit there is more than the amount I stole from elsewhere to make up the braid. So once that's clipped off, I think that counts as 3 nettles, fair and square. It's not complex Sprang, it's very, very simple. But you compare that to the first sample and it will only get better. There's still lots and lots of bark attached to this. As it's used and worn, that's definitely going to turn in to something much more like yarn and much less like the bark. What else I can use it for? I had a brainwave. It's just the right size for some of my business cards. That will be quite nice, tucked into my bag when I'm out doing prehistoric events, just in case I need to give somebody a card. I'm really pleased with that. It is not the best piece of Sprang in the world, but I wasn't aiming for that. I was just aiming for something that didn't break in progress, that worked up practically, and that was spliced according to what we currently understand to be the prehistoric technology, and using barely processed nettles. I really didn't put a lot of effort into this. So that's at least my first go at the 3 nettle challenge for 2021. I hope you're going to have a go too. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you make. Till then, happy hitch bothering.